Good afternoon and welcome to Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station. This is your holy host, the Bishop of Santa Clarita, back for another opportunity to talk about the two things we're not supposed to talk about in public, religion and politics, and yes, they indeed mix. Well, beautiful day here in Southern California. Hope you're enjoying your day. We definitely are here in the beautiful Santa Clarita Valley. Got a great show for you today. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined online with Daniel Mercuri, who is running to be our next governor in the state of California. We've had Daniel on at least two or three other times, and so we try to make Daniel a relative if you will, an individual who calls in from time to time to just give us an update of what's going on with his campaign. So he's a local here, and so we're thankful to be able to have him call in here in just a minute. We'll ask him some questions about the current front runner right now when it comes to the Republican side, which of course is Steve Hilton. I'll have more to say about him in just a few moments. The other thing that we're going to talk about a little bit later as well, we talked about it last week, and I think it needs to be talked about again and brought up today, which is AB Assembly Bill 495. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the bad things about that bill and what exactly this bill is going to do, even though it doesn't say that outright. Remember, when these folks write these bills, it's supposed to look and read magnanimously as if they love people and they love children, but in reality, it's the subtlety that is the problem. And so we're going to take a little bit of time and talk about AB 495 at the bottom of the hour. The other thing that I want to bring up today as well is the whole Adam Schiff story. And now we just heard through Catherine Herringer, CBS News, that also now not only is Adam Schiff being blamed of leaking classified documents in order to hurt Donald Trump during his first term in office, we also find out that Eric Swalwell, the Ken doll, was also leaked classified documents to hurt Donald Trump. So we'll be talking about that in just a few moments and talking about a news story from Just the News by John Solomon that hopefully will be of interest to you. The other thing that just came over the presses the last couple of days is same-sex marriage, as I like to refer to it as same-sex mirage. What if the Supreme Court of the United States, on the heels of overturning Roe v. Wade in 2021, 2022, are now on the verge of overturning Obergefell, the landmark case that guaranteed the right to same-sex marriage nationwide? Well, that is something that the Supreme Court is going to possibly take up by the fall of this year. And if that happens, that would be amazing. And so, can you imagine the level of vitriol if indeed the Obergefell decision was overturned? I would suggest to you that it was wrongly decided, and therefore the Supreme Court created a right for gays to get married, essentially. And so we'll be talking about that in a few minutes as well. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention, which I think is just amazing, did you hear about the Whole Foods up in Cupertino area, up in the Bay Area? It was a Whole Foods market that was closed down because of rat and rodent infestation. So there's a Whole Foods market in Cupertino, which again is up in the Bay Area, that had to be closed for more than 3 months, folks, following a serious rodent infestation. According to some experts, the prolonged closure may have something to do with a recent California law that restricts the use of anticoagulant rat poisons. Now, you already knew that a law from the state legislature in the state of California had to be the culprit, right? So a Whole Foods market closed down for 3 months because of a serious rodent infestation. Now, What is the main issue here? Why did they have to close down? Because of a bill that was put out that came into effect earlier this year. It was called the Poison Free Wildlife Act. It took effect earlier this year in 2025. And the law expands the ban of anticoagulant rodenticides. That's a fancy way of saying rat poison. In most circumstances, except when the infestation affects agriculture, water supply, or poses a public health risk. So in other words, you can't use the rat poison at the Whole Foods, but you can use the rat foods at the farm where they're growing the food. I can't understand that. So the law cited the devastating effects on California wildlife. It goes on to say wild animals like mountain lions were getting sick or dying through secondary poisonings after consuming poisoned rodents. A 2023 California Fish and Game Wildlife report found that roughly 88% of raptors, that would be birds, folks, not those reptiles that are on the Jurassic Park movies, and 90% of pumas tested were exposed to the poisons. Some of these rat poisons can cause wildlife to behave abnormally, strangely, and in some cases, kill them. Now, let's just be honest, folks. How much you want to bet that the two places in California where rodent infestations tend to be the worst are number 2, San Francisco, and how much you want to bet where number 1 is? Number 1 is Los Angeles. So the two most liberal cities in all of California, San Francisco and Los Angeles, have rodent problems in their stores and restaurants. Why? Because of this law that now says that if you own a store, you manage a restaurant, you own a restaurant, whatever the case might be, you can't use certain poisons because that would cause a secondary issue down the road if the rat leaves the middle of downtown Los Angeles and happens to find its way up at Mount Baldy. I don't know if a rat travels that far, but evidently that is what they're suggesting here. And so it just makes no sense to me, folks, how these individuals who write these laws, none of them have ever owned a business, folks. I would be hard-pressed to find any of these city councilmen, any of these individuals who actually own a business and actually have, signed the front of a paycheck, and yet they write these bills thinking that they're advocating for the good of the state, when in reality, it's a problem. So I think we have our call on. Daniel, are you on?
I am.
Sorry about that, Daniel. All right. All right. I did not know you were on the line, Daniel. Oh, did you? Did you tell me? I didn't know that. Oh my goodness. Is that what that was? Is that amazing? All right, Daniel, we'll hold you over at the bottom of the hour here. So, first of all, Daniel Mercuri, running to be our next governor. Good to have you back on today on Politics in the Pulpit.
Thank you, Pastor. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, we are just months away from the March primaries to decide the top 2 candidates. How has your campaign been gaining some traction to be in the top 2, Daniel?
That's a great question. I mean, I have not stopped going from town to town. Again, there's only so many hours in the day. There's, so many days in the month. I've actually had to turn down a number of interviews that have overlapped or conflicting schedules. So that's a good problem to have.
Sure.
When, I'm getting phone calls and I'm getting asked to come to locations and it's not even just, which is really great, and I love technology, is it's also getting, it's expanding where a lot of groups don't want to wait for me to come down physically. They're willing to do Zooms. They're willing to do a town hall digitally, which is exceptional. Why not use the latest technology and save in that capacity, which has done great things for the campaign. Again, I'm being compared quite often to, I guess the supposed front runner, which, I would question. But at the end of the day, it's good when people are very interested in making comparisons now. They want to know. They are seeking, the individual personally, which I don't think this is now my fourth campaign in my third gubernatorial race. I've not ever been this busy. And it could be due to the fact that people are very hungry for somebody who's going to take the helms and do right by the people. And I think people right now are not following the typical trends. They're really kind of dismissing polls. They're really dismissing who they're being told to vote for, and following the old playbook that just has been the playbook that has not worked for decades. And so they're willing to step outside the norm. And this is what I see up and down the state. So I was in San Bernardino. I was in Palmdale. I'm going to be up in Modesto, Santa Cruz, back down to Los Angeles. I'm going to be at the GOP convention. So, it's nonstop. So this is a good thing. And this is an excellent, I don't know, I guess a portrayal of what I'm doing. And clearly that name recognition has flourished by far. There is at least somebody in every group that I've gone to that does know me.
So what are the main points of distinction, Daniel, that separates you from both Sheriff Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton? Obviously, they're what we would call the titular frontrunners, right, because of the name recognition. But what would be the main points of distinction that separate you from those two other candidates?
I think one of the top things that I get across the board is Daniel comes up with a solution. I don't just tell you and speak in platitudes, which is what a lot of the other candidates do. They'll tell you that there's a problem and we need to fix the state. Well, of course, we all know this. But what's not being followed up is how are you going to do it? So when they talk about the homeless, there's no actual follow-up, and that's by design. Usually a lot of the candidates do not want to actually outline or say specifically what they might do, because if they get into office, they don't want to be held accountable. So it's easier to speak in generalities than it is to actually give, how are you going to do this? And a lot of times it has to do with the fact that they don't know. They don't actually understand vested authorities. I can talk about law enforcement and say they're policy enforcers, they're not constitutionalists. I could talk about an individual who is a commentator but doesn't actually understand the depth and the vested authorities of all three branches and how this position is going to work and function, what you are capable of doing and can do. I hear a lot of, well, I'm just going to, wave my pen and, write a bunch of executive actions, but that actually is counterintuitive and contradictory to what exactly the authority vested in the executive branch can do legally, lawfully, and constitutionally. And so I provide those solutions. And in addition, I also provide information to the groups that I go to with what they can do locally. Because it's just not about me. This is my state. I was born here. I was raised here. This is where I'm raising my family. I haven't left this state. I am fighting for the state. But I know that I can't fight 430 cities and 58 counties, but you can. And one of the best things that I can do is provide some information as how you can push back and engage in what is actionable in your area. I do my homework when I go from city to city or county to county in trying to, not just sit there and say, hey, here I am, and I have this vision, and this is how I grew up. No, I'm going to start off with, here are some problems that I know that are going on in the state. I know this has affected your region, and this is some of the things that I've seen other groups do that I have personally helped out with, digging up information, how you can push back at the local level, and what you can do to try to engage in removing specific laws that are egregious. They don't align harmoniously with the state constitution or the Constitution of the United States, and what we can do before you even attempt to try to, everybody says, well, let's go to court. And that doesn't always work. People don't have the finances for that, and that is a long road. There's other ways, and this is what separates me from all the other candidates. It's not just about the seat of governor. It's about how we can ensure that everybody understands that they are more powerful than the government, because that is how it's written in the Declaration of Independence, and that is how it's outlined in the Constitution. It is the definition to the limitation of powers. It ensures the Constitution that the status of the people remains above government at all times. And I go around to ensure what you can do in some respect to maintain that authority.
Well, I think it's important also to let our listeners know that you are running a grassroots blue-collar campaign. You are holding a job, you have children, you have a wife, you have a home to maintain, and at the same time, you're running to be the next governor of California. So it's not like you have an endless amount of time to devote to running for governor because you have all these other things that you have to also do simultaneously. But at the same time, you realize the importance of bold and broad leadership in California, and that's why you're running.
That's a beautiful point that you bring up. This is why I've spent so many years beforehand building up my name, going around the state of California. Like I said, I have hit all 58 counties at least twice at a minimum. I've gone to over 230, 240 cities now, and I've had roughly over 70 interviews to date. So this isn't a lack of effort when people say, well, you need a lot of money. But, well, if you don't have a lot of money, you need a lot of creativity. And this is why I've spent so much of my time beforehand building it up, all the way back to November 2022 when I made my announcement and declaration for the 2026. And so this has allowed me to have that momentum, which is why my name is mentioned with other people who have been given hundreds of thousands of dollars. How am I able to keep up? Well, because I started years early, and because of the fact that I understand how hard it is to donate money. I understand that, your time, your effort that you put in to make a living is, you're timid to give that money to somebody who maybe you don't necessarily like, or maybe you feel like it's the lesser of two evils, or there's uncertainty. And so a lot of people aren't giving the way, you would imagine this time around. In fact, it's just not the case. A lot of people are curious who's going to make the ballot. So that's another thing that I've come across. Will I make the ballot? Well, I have a track record of making ballots. So it's not a matter of if I'm going to be able to get on. It is the fact that I am now a dominant thorn in everyone's side, and I am the candidate whose name is who's being whispered up and down. And one of the best things is I always say, slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah, I've been hearing various amounts what it would cost to run a viable campaign for governor here in California, considering the length and breadth of our state. Right, 58 counties and several 100 miles from Southern California all the way up to Northern California, and then of course the width of our state as well from the west to the east. It is a huge state, and I keep hearing, you got to have $50 million, you got to have $75 million, you got to have $100 million. Well, all I know is this. You can run a campaign completely different today than maybe you could just 4 years ago, considering AI, considering all of the podcasts and all of the other things that make a campaign more viable today than, again, 4 or 5 years ago. When we come back, Daniel, at the bottom of the hour here, I want you to answer that question about how you're going to kind of be a little more ingenious and strategic in running your campaign, as opposed to maybe what Kamala Harris did in 2024, where they bragged about knocking on all these doors and doing all these mailers, but in reality, she came up way, way short. But Trump, the older candidate, the old white guy, as they like to say, he was the guy that listened to his son Barron and said, go on these podcasts and do these things that the other side won't do because they just don't see it as viable. So when we come back on Politics in the Pulpit, I want you to be prepared to answer that question, Daniel.
Absolutely.
All right. When we come back, we'll be talking to Daniel Mercuri, who is running for California governor, in just a minute here on your hometown station. All right, we're back here on the bottom of the hour with Politics in the Pulpit and your holy host, the Bishop of Santa Clarita, Pastor Jerry Cook. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Daniel Mercuri, running to be our next governor of California. Before we went to break, I was teeing up a question for Daniel and just asking Daniel, with all that I've heard about how much it costs to run for governor in this very big state we call California, I was wondering what Daniel was going to do to take advantage of things like AI and other social media platforms to run a campaign that is completely different and maybe won't cost like you're trying to buy the planet Mars. So, Daniel, tell us, or maybe the planet Mercury. How about that? That'd be even better. So Daniel, how? Come on, that was good. So, what are you doing to offset those huge costs to run a more clean, efficient campaign?
Well, again, that's another great question, and I'm glad you brought it up, that we touched on a little bit earlier, and that is, absolutely, I am working in with AI. I do have a program that actually came from a good friend of mine who is also a former gubernatorial candidate down south, that helped me to sort of strategize and break apart to approach the unfortunate of voters who have been disenfranchised. And we're combining it with my research that I took over the last year to figure out where those missing votes came from, what counties they came from. It took a year for me to do this. And it just so happened, I always say everything is in God's timing, that, I get a phone call and he says, listen, I built this whole platform and I want you to have it. I really want you to win and I want to show you how it works. And we just had a meeting on it about 2 weeks ago on how we're going to implement this sort of war room strategy, utilizing the AI, targeting exactly where some of these disenfranchised votes came from. The other candidates don't have this, mainly because, well, I did the research. And it took a lot for me to try to figure it out. And I also came across another individual down south that actually worked inside of the county clerk registrar's office with a lot of insights about how, there's so much fraudulent activity and what we can do to get around that. So this is going to be some of my messaging when it comes to these individuals that we're going to target, and of course, digitally, how we're going to hit them up and, get my message into their hands and try to reinvigorate them and bringing some hope and getting them to the, getting them, to the precincts to vote, right? Getting them and voting on that ballot. The other things too that you mentioned, social media. One of the big things that's been really, really amazing for me is utilizing X Spaces, which is something that, again, a lot of candidates are just now kind of picking up on, but, some of them aren't quite sure how they can use it to their benefit. But it's actually helped me gain from, I was, again, about 2 months ago, I think I had 120 supporters. I now have 1,300 supporters, right? So just in 2 months, I gained supporters and joined a couple of groups that now are up and down the state of California. So I don't just have people in local regions where some people say, you should really hit your backyard, but, it's like you said earlier, it's a big state, and I need bodies in all the counties that I can reach. And X-Space is where I have made myself readily available to go on these Q&A sessions where people can just speak to me plainly. They can ask me questions plainly. They can engage in discourse. And one of the best highlights for me is that leftists or Democrats or people who are just not, they're not for the party system, but they're weary. These people have been coming in from all walks of life from our state, asking questions because they're unsure as to, who they're going to vote for, or if they are a Democrat, they don't like the direction the party's going in. And it's afforded me the ability to talk to people in many different parts of the state that I wouldn't normally get, especially some of the rural areas where you just can't get to, right? They're so small, maybe it's a population of 10,000 people, and, they just don't really have the means to, have anybody come out, or they really haven't reached out. And there are people who live there who are calling in and starting to follow and ask these questions. And I get tons of follow-up questions through my message board and, of course, through the campaign line. So that's been a huge change and shift in how most candidates should be utilizing this, but I'm noticing that they're not. And this is something that I've been really tapped into, and having other bodies really kind of spread the message. In fact, it's gotten to the point where some people in Central California now are, which is great, they're huge supporters. Now I have people asking for bumper stickers and card magnets, which I've created. So people can go on my website, they can click on the flyer page or merchandise, and they can download the image and send it to their local print shop. And that's been another plus for me as well.
And by the way, what is that website, Daniel?
It's danielforcalgovernor.com. So again, my web campaign website is Daniel, DANIEL, for FOR, Cal, CAL, governor.com. You can go on the flyer page. There's a couple drop downs. You'll see it plain as day. And you can pick whatever flyer you want that you can go door to door, which I do have people doing. People are calling in asking for door to door and flyers that they can hand out, and they can pick whichever one they want. Some people want bumper stickers as well as card magnets, and you can just download the image and send it to your print shop. And that's been such a helpful tool.
Your thoughts on the governor of our state, who is not interested at all in governing California, but is actually just wanting to run for president in 2028. But your thoughts on Gavin Newsom signaling today that he is going forward in redistricting the state of California, thereby diminishing more Republican representation in Congress. What I heard today is that what Gavin is trying to do is basically stop Trump's presidency by giving the Democrats the congressional seats in 2026. Your thoughts on what Gavin Newsom is trying to do here?
Well, personally, it's criminal. It also does not represent the people of the state. He's doing this as a political ploy. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to succeed, but of course we know that the state of California is filled with, lawfare judges and, activists, representatives who really don't care for the Constitution nor of their constituents that they swore to protect and uphold. We're basically, this is just a huge ploy for him to try to garner attention that, he's fighting, Trump. Really, when he's falling prey to is that Trump deranged syndrome that really just sort of exposes just how corrupt he really is, how corrupt the left really is. Basically, this is a true Marxist tactic where, you do something that is egregious and you blame the opposition for doing the exact thing that you're doing. And this is where we're at with him. He is a criminal. I think most of us here who are of a sane, sound in mind know that he is a criminal, and yet there is no accountability. And this is where a new governor needs to come into play. This is where somebody who's saying, listen, you put me in office, he will be held accountable. He will not just be investigated. He will be indicted. He will be prosecuted. There is a plethora of things that he has violated his oath of office. He has passed egregious legislation. He has engaged in criminal misconduct, abuse of power, fiduciary delinquency. I mean, the list goes on and on, money laundering and so on. There's so much criminality behind this individual, yet he's getting away with it. And I'm talking to your audience right now. We need to be fired up. And we need to ensure that who we put in office is not going to just simply say, let Gavin Newsom go and, he can ride off into the sunset. No, if there is no consequence to the criminal misconduct of these egregious legislators, executors, and judges, what is the point? They're going to continue to do what they're doing. And right now, this is, in my personal opinion, a last hurrah for him to try to see if they can, win back over the House so that in hopes that when he thinks he's going to run, he's going to be the next president of the United States. Not on my watch.
One final question, Daniel Mercuri, before we give you the final opportunity to plug your campaign. AB 495 is going to be going through State Committee next Tuesday. Myself, as well as a bunch of folks that I know of, Jack Hibbs and others, are going to be up at the state capitol next Tuesday. Jack Hibbs said this to his congregation about a week ago. He says, if this law passes, I'm going to encourage you to take your kids and leave the state. What say you, Daniel Mercuri?
I disagree with that in the sense of leaving, because basically we're giving up, and I'm not one who's so easily given up. I think, if people really look at the law like I have and you see it, there is trickery in the language. When it talks about the forms that they're going to be utilizing, there's the element of non-relative extended family member. That's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a non-relative extended family member, right? So again, these are the language that they're using and how the documentation is utilized and in what respect in order for anybody who can fill out a form, but the people who are supposed to be the handlers of the forms are not required, or is there any obligation to make any further inquiry or investigation as to the form being handed to them when it comes to some sort of medical incapacitation of a child, that some person can come in and hand this form over, right? It doesn't require the person or the school or any other body or facility to inquire further investigation as to the legitimacy behind it. And so there's wiggle room in here because of that. So even though there has to be some sort of identity or a form of identification of the individual putting the form out, there's not going to be really any inquiry as to the legitimacy behind that. So it could be anybody. And this is where the trickery is at. So you have to really read the language. I don't agree with simply letting it happen because it allows for people leaving the state, because there's a lot of good people who are just disenfranchised with the laws and the corruption, but they shouldn't fall prey to us who are believers in simply saying, well, I got to throw up my hands on, it's time to leave. No, it's time for us to push back and fight back like we've never fought before. And when our children are at stake, this requires all of us, those of us who are strong faith believers, to not just sound the alarm, but to get involved.
Give us your campaign website again, Daniel, one last time.
My campaign website is danielforcalgovernor.com. So again, that's Daniel, DANIEL, for FOR, Cal, CAL, governor.com. And if anybody would like to participate and be on my team, send us an email through the contact page. You can also call the campaign line and send a text. And, of course, you are more than welcome to donate whatever you feel that you are willing to give. Any donation is a generous donation. And I'm really looking forward to continue on with this battle in my campaign and really trying to wake up the people in hopes that I will win the people of California over to take over the seat and really put this state back into the people's hands.
Daniel Mercuri, thank you for joining us again here on your hometown station on Politics and the Pulpit. Looking forward to seeing you soon and then perhaps having you back on the show in another couple of months.
Absolutely. Look forward. Again, always a pleasure, Pastor Jerry.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. As Daniel was saying in reference to AB 495, really it should be fight and not flight. I would disagree with Jack Hibbs, even though I respect Jack Hibbs and I think that he is a well-meaning preacher. And frankly, when it comes to preachers that kept their doors open during COVID, he kept his doors open while a lot of the guys that I know shut their doors and cowered in the corners of capitulation. So I'm going to give Jack Hibbs a bone on that. However, I think it's important for us to fight. And I think that this coming Tuesday, August 19th, there needs to be a huge representation of righteous indignation on the state capitol steps. And like I told my congregation on Sunday, what kind of a bill, how overt does the bill have to be for people to finally say, you know what, enough is enough? And there's all kinds of horrible bills that have been pinned by both congressional status as well as state assemblymen up there. And this is about as bad as it gets. And think about this. AB 495 is misleadingly titled the Family Unity and Preparedness Act, all right? And it is making its way through the California legislature as we speak, and we want to put a stop to it this coming Tuesday. And of course, it's being framed as a compassionate measure to help children. There it is right there. That's the be-all, end-all. They always throw children in there as the empathetic, compassionate caricature for you to then look at this bill and say, well, obviously they must have the children's best interest in mind and heart. And that is not the case. The truth is, AB 495 opens the door for adults who are not the child's legal guardian and may not even be related, as Daniel Mercuri said earlier, to gain temporary custody with little more than a signature, folks. And here's what the bill actually does. This is reading between the lines. It allows any adult, including a non-relative with no legal connection to the family, to assume broad authority over a child by signing a caregiver affidavit. There's no court hearing for that, no background check, no oversight at all. It could be any non-relative with no legal connection to the family. So little Johnny could be dropped off at school this morning, and Johnny's parents don't come and get him after school. It's some non-relative with no legal connection. You fill in who that might be. The second thing that AB 495 opens the door to is it requires schools and licensed child care providers to implement policies that limit cooperation with immigration enforcement even when the safety or identity of a child is in question. Folks, why is the school standing in the way of cooperation with policies that are already laws, both in California as well as federal laws? They're standing in the way of both state laws and federal law. Why would they do that? And why would they do that in order to allow a non-relative and with no legal connection to pick that kid up? And then the third thing that this bill does is it blocks schools and child care staff from gathering or reporting information related to a child's immigration status or the legitimacy of custody arrangements. I had on my show last week Attorney Aaron Friday, who's the president of Our Duty USA, and she described it plainly. She said, quote, "This is a child trafficker's and kidnapper's dream bill. We're talking about a legal pathway for predators to operate in plain sight. And now they have a bill, if passed, to make all of that legitimate and legal." I'll guarantee you, I don't have any proof of this, but I guarantee you that somebody's getting paid with cartel money. Why? Because the cartels make the majority of their money through child sex trafficking, folks. Somebody in our government, I don't know if it's true, but could it be that they're being paid with child sex trafficking money to pass a bill like this that gives them a little bit more leeway and a little bit more legitimacy? Who knows? I hope and pray that you will stand with us next Tuesday, August 19th. When we come back on Politics in the Pulpit, we'll talk a little bit about Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, and whether or not Obergefell and gay marriage might be overturned. All right, we're back here for our final segment of Politics and the Pulpit here on your hometown station. Well, just a few years ago, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned Roe versus Wade. A huge, huge overturning. No one would have ever thought about it. But now it's possible that the Supreme Court is facing a choice about whether to take up a case filed by former Kentucky clerk Kim Davis, who has been in the news for several years now, urging the overturn and the decision of Obergefell versus Hodges, which is the landmark case that guaranteed the right to same-sex marriage nationwide. Now, why does this matter, and why should this matter to you? Well, the case filed by Davis, who is a former Kentucky clerk, by the way, she was one of those individuals who would not issue marriage certificates, and that's what put her into the news. She spent 6 days in jail over her refusal to provide marriage certificates to same-sex couples on religious grounds. I thought we lived in a country where people could petition based on religious convictions, but evidently we don't anymore. She said could represent a threat to federal prosecutions or federal protections, for same-sex marriage 1 decade after the nation's highest court legalized the unions across the country. Some justices, like Clarence Thomas, have signaled an openness to revisiting the case in recent years as the court has moved to the right politically. That conservative shift on cultural issues has been defined by its 2022 ruling overturning, of course, Roe v. Wade, which for decades guaranteed abortion rights. So, if the court overturns nationwide same-sex marriage, the issue would likely return to the states just like it did with Roe v. Wade, many of which have still not passed laws allowing members of the same sex to get married. Now, I know Christians that don't like the fact that the abortion bill was overturned. The whole point of Roe v. Wade. Some people say it didn't really make a difference. And some people would say that this probably wouldn't make a difference. I'm sure there'll be a Christian voice out there that would not be satisfied with this, and it goes back to the states. And all the blue states will probably rush to have a special election to enshrine that in their constitution, much like the state of California has done that here with Proposition 1 from a little over a year ago. And then all the red states will probably enshrine to either limit or outlaw it. Probably more like limit as opposed to outlaw. Maybe go back to same-sex unions instead of same-sex marriages, which again I like to refer to as same-sex mirages. But all I know is if the Supreme Court does pick this up in the fall and they decide to overturn this decision, that would be huge. The last thing that I want to talk about quickly this afternoon, and I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, because when I think of some of the smarmiest individuals in politics, I cannot help but think of the face of Adam Schiff. There is something about that face that is so loathsome. And of course, President Trump refers to him as pencil neck, and there's a reason for that. It's because he has this very thin neck and this very bloated head attached to that lofty body of his. And then there's a second name that popped up today in terms of leaking classified info in order to hurt Donald Trump, and that would be Eric Swalwell, the human Ken doll, who also dated a Chinese spy, and I think might have gone a little further than just dating her. These two individuals have now been implicated by way of a Democratic whistleblower. Yes, you heard it right, a Democrat whistleblower who was privy to these leaks before they happened, actually warned Adam Schiff as well as Swalwell about the illegality of these leaks, and they went with it anyway. So President Donald Trump on Wednesday cited bombshell witness testimony first revealed by Just the News, that's John Solomon's site, that he said provided irrefutable proof that Democrat Senator Adam Schiff, now also Eric Swalwell, had approved a scheme to leak classified information to harm him during his first term. Now, I don't know about you, but if you are leaking intelligence information which is already illegal, and the entire intent is to hurt the incoming president, what is the only word you can think about there? And that word is treason. That is a treasonous act. Now, a career intelligence officer who worked for Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee for more than a decade repeatedly warned the FBI beginning in 2017 that then Representative Schiff had approved classified or leaking classified documents to smear Trump over the now debunked Russiagate scandal, according to FBI memos that now Director Kash Patel has turned over to Congress and that were first obtained by Just the News just a couple days ago on Monday. I'm going to ask my board operator a couple questions here before we come off the air. Mike, if you were president in some world far, far away, and a congressman intentionally leaked information against you which he knew was false, what would you call that?
Treason.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's totally treasonous. Now, we have held people for treason in the past. Of course, I think the name Benedict Arnold obviously now rings true with prophetic poignancy for the last 200 years. I completely believe this Democratic whistleblower who has no real benefit in this other than just being other than just being someone who loves the country, and a Democrat can indeed love the country, who says to Adam Schiff, hey, if we release these things, this could come back to bite us. And according to this article, it goes on to say that Schiff said, not unless they catch us.
Yeah.
And now it seems that they have caught up with him. Now, real quick, we got 2 minutes left. Do you think that Adam Schiff or Eric Swalwell will ever see the inside of a jail cell?
No, I don't. I don't.
And isn't that sad?
And they may have worked together on this too.
Oh, no doubt.
There's that's a lot of not one single actor that would do that.
Yeah. And I'll guarantee you that over the next few days, more and more players will come out, because there was. I truly believe that TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, is true. One last thing that I'll mention. So I heard through this same article here, as I was reading it, that had Hillary Clinton won in 2016, she was somehow going to put Adam Schiff as the head of the CIA. Because she lost, Adam was bitter and was trying to find a way to get back at Trump, and this was part of the way, the whole Russia, and the intelligence leaks. If that is the case, I think that's pretty smarmy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That reeks.
Yeah. Well,
and they're so obvious about it.
They are. And
I mean, we're not stupid.
And the way they deny it is irritating, but either way. Well, next Wednesday, I'll be back here coming fresh off of the Sacramento trip. in standing in opposition with many hundreds of, if not thousands of people.
Big plans up there, huh?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think there'll be thousands of people on the steps of Sacramento, and we're going to be opposing AB 495. What is our desire? We want this bill dead on arrival. We don't want any vote on it at all. We want this thing, if not amended to the point where it doesn't even look like it does currently. So
This is a no-brainer.
we would love this thing to die. So for those of you out there, would you pray that this thing would die the death of 1,000 cuts, and that there would be a bunch of people standing for righteousness in Sacramento next Tuesday? You can join us as well. I would love for you to come up. I'll give you all the report about this next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel, here on your hometown station. This is Pastor Cook saying thank you for tuning in. God bless you.